Welcome to season 3 of Parenting with a Purpose.
I am your host, Donna Janelle.
And I'm your co-host, Pamela.
And this season, we have some exciting sessions. We got parenting from prison, parenting after prison, cultural differences in parenting, financial literacy. We got all this exciting stuff coming this season.
And we're taking parenting with a purpose around the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Parenting with a Purpose. I am your host, Donna Janelle, where we bring back the responsibility and nobility and beauty back into parenting, right? We know as parents, it's challenging, it's struggles, it's a hard knock out here for parents, but I'm here to tell you that it does get easier. It's not going to be very easy, but it does get easier as time go on. And our job as parents, our responsibility is making sure that we're raising up the now generation. I don't even say the next generation. I say the now generation because our kids are so bright and intelligent where they can make changes now. So how are we raising our children to be even leaders as they're following us, right? So Parenting with a Purpose, our goal is to make sure that we're able to put the tools in our children, that we don't send them outside naked, right? We don't send them out there for the world to clothe our children. Because I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's a lot of clothes going on lately. Like the world is clothing our children with so many different things and so many different thoughts, and then their behaviors are changing just based on what the world said that our children should be. Our first responsibility in parenting is to making sure that our children are growing up to be successful, right? Whatever success looks like for you and your household, everybody has their own standard and levels of success and things like that. You know, success in education, success in finances, success socially, whatever it is. But as long as we're invested in our children and making sure that they get those tools to and be able to apply it so that they can do much better in the world and make the world a better place than we have grown up in or where we even live at now, right? Right now, there's so many things that's going on in parenting that I feel like there is a mandate on parenting right now. Like, it is our job and our responsibilities to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. We are healing ourselves so that we don't bleed on our children, healing our wounds so that we don't bleed on our children or cause our children to be injured in such a way as we were in our past, right? So there's such a mandate on parenting. There's so many different things when we look at what's going on in the world. And the first thing that they say, y'all, is like, where are the parents at? What's going on with the parents? How are these children raised? Are the parents active or non-active? Like, what is going on in parenting? And by right, they should say that, y'all. By right, the first questions they should say is what's going on in the parenting level, because they are our children. They are not the world's children. They are not the government's children. They are not the school system children. Like, they are our children, and it's our job to make sure that they have what they need to succeed, right? In order for them to have what they need to succeed is we have to have it for ourselves. We can't give what we don't have. We can't teach what we don't know. So we have to learn some things ourselves, so then we should be able to teach our children. Maya Angelou has a quote, and Maya Angelou is one of my favorite poets and just humans in just general, right? And her quote is that when you learn, you teach. When you get, you give. Basically, like, whatever I'm learning as an adult, as a mom, you know, the things that are good, bad, or different, whatever I'm learning, I'm going to ultimately teach that to my children, right? And my children are ultimately teach that to their children and their children, and that's how that generational thing happens, right? So we're constantly talking about generational curses, right? Forever we're always talking about, oh, that's a generational curse, that's a generational curse. However, if we really flip the script in the mindset, we can have so many generational blessings. Like, you know, the Bible tells us that a good man or woman leaves an inheritance for their children, right? So we always think about this financial thing. We want to set our kids up so that they don't have to work or finances to be so straight that they don't have to struggle. That's not even what it's saying. Is that an inheritance mean that all the goodness that we have, we should leave our children, right? The desire to love God, the desire to be good, our morals, our ethics, they are inheritance. Like, that is something that is passed down to our children, right? Are you the character, a good person? Are you morally straight? Are you ethically straight? Like, these are things that we're actually passing down to our children and generations, and they can be a blessing. They don't have to be curses, right? So I think that I beg people to really think about and change the mindset of these generational curses. Yeah, there's some things that have passed down to generations, but I also believe as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Whatever you speak shall come to pass. Like, our words have power. So I'm speaking blessings and blessings and blessings upon the family and all those who are involved, right? So I think that we really need to, because if we start saying the generational curse thing and we keep saying it over and over again and we repeat that to our children, they're going to think that they are a curse, not a blessing. Our children are a gift from God. So they are our blessing. They are our gifts. So we really got to change our mindset of how we think about our children and think about the world as whole, and even think about ourselves, so that we can really give our children what they need. Now, I know that it might sound crazy that I'm talking about parents need to put in the work, because around here we put in the work, but we do. We put in the work for ourselves. And I was talking to a group of young ladies, and one of the things that I was expressing to them is that a lot of times people say your children are your first priority. And I used to say that. I used to be like, my children are my heartbeat. I have 4 children. The 4 chambers of my heart, right? They're my heartbeat. But then what happens if one of them are out of line, so that my heart don't beat anymore? No. Or my heart has to beat irregular because one is not doing the things that I want them to do, or stand aligned with the things that I think for our family, that I have set up for our family. No, so I no longer say my children are my heartbeat. But I also say that my children aren't my first priority. That might sound crazy, y'all. I know. Hold on. Get your seatbelt on. That might sound a little crazy. My children are not my first priority. I'm going to say it for the people in the back. My children are not my first priority. My first priority is me. And I say that to say, because if I'm not right, I'm not going to be able to give to my kids. A lot of parents, we think that once we have children, and we have to make our children the main center of attention, right? And that means that we start forgetting about ourselves, investing in ourselves, doing self-care for ourselves, or really getting us to a place where we can parent properly, right? If we have our children just be the center, what happens when they leave? What happens when they grow up? What happens when they don't do things according to the way that you want them to? So then what happens? Like, your world is crushed. Like, we become lost, confused, don't know who we are. But if we build ourselves from the inside out, and our parenting will be so much better. So I'm getting myself together for me, not just my child. I'm getting myself together for me, not just my child. Because what good is it for me to get myself together just for my child? Once my child grow and they leave, I'm still jacked up, right? Because I didn't even take a hold of healing. I didn't take a hold of getting myself to make myself whole and complete outside of my children. Again, you can't give what you don't have. So I just urge parents that, and I know there's going to be some people disagree with me. Hey, listen, I get it. I was one of those parents who said my kids are my first priority. They my heartbeats, all that. I get it. However, I'm just in a different space in the season, just understanding the true meaning of parenting and what our jobs are for our children and our responsibilities. But we are responsible to ourselves first. That's like parents are the first leaders, right? But how are you going to lead your child if you can't lead yourself? We need to invest in our own leadership. We need to invest in the things that that we deal with, right? The things that we deal with, hurt or whatever it is, we need to get help. Because let me tell you something. There's too much help out here in the world. Technology, resources. Now, granted, there's not a lot of therapists available, particularly in the community, in our community. However, there are online therapists now. There are tools that are online. Like, you could pop up GPT, and you could get you could probably have a whole therapy session with chat. I'm telling you. Or utilize our children. If we're dealing with something and you're not sure, have a conversation. Can you help me out with this? They could pull up that information so fast. Our kids know so much. So I feel like we are without excuse of why we aren't parenting correctly. We are without excuse. There's too many resources. So then I say, well, if we're not parenting correctly and we're not utilizing the resources, do we want to? Do we want to? Or are we just living an autopilot life? Are we just around here saying, okay, I got these kids, so I'm gonna give them food, clothes, and shelter. I don't have to deal with their emotional, social, or physical needs, like food, clothes, and shelter. That's a question. And I think as parents, we really need to ask ourselves that question. Like, what am I here for? What is my job? What am I supposed to do with these children? I constantly say, and I tell y'all, y'all know My one kid, 1 out of 4, tests my inner gangster all the time. And I constantly ask God, what am I supposed to do with her and how am I supposed to handle her, right? Because I don't want to fumble her. And I also want not to quench her, who she is. Like, I don't want her personality to change, right? I just think that there's some character behaviors that I need to help out with, right? But I don't want to take away from who she is, but I also want to add to who she is. So I constantly ask God, how am I supposed to handle this one right here? Because this girl right here, I'm telling you, sometimes I wonder, like, what happened in your sleep? Did I do something? Did I beat you up in your sleep or something? Because when you wake up, it's like, but I'm learning she's not a morning person, right? Just because I'm bubbly in the morning and I'm like on 100 all the time, I am literally on 100 all the time. I just enjoy life, and I just had too many dark experiences not to walk in the light. So with her, she's growing, right? And right now, this is where she at. She wake up and I don't know, it's just be something going on with her. But I'm no longer coming against that, though. I'm not saying, why are you so angry? What did I do to you? This, that, and the other. I'm like, hey, I still hit her with some kindness, slap her with some kindness and some love, and start, I do crazy stuff like start dancing in front of her and stuff like that to kind of get her out of whatever mood that she was in or what kind of sleep she had, right? But I want her to be able to utilize some of them things that, because they're not necessarily weaknesses, they are uniquenesses. And I think that for us as parents, we need to still value everything about our children, even if it's something that we don't agree with. So that's where I'm at with her. But I constantly ask God, help me with this one, because she tells my inner gangster every day. And I even tell her, I said, so this is what we doing today? So as parents, we got to figure this thing out. So with that being said, I said a lot, right? But tonight, let me tell you what we're talking about tonight. Y'all know this is voting season, right? We are voting. And I know that you're like, what does parenting and voting have to do to each other, right? What's going on with that? But it's so important, and I'm gonna tell you why. So I have a bunch of stuff that I wrote down here, but I'm gonna try to skim it down just a little bit because I did a lot of research on it. Because I know for me as a mom, I teach my children. I've always taught my children about the systems, the Congress, the Senate, the president. Like we're fully invested in this voting thing on all levels. Community, like councilman, mayor, representative, council, Congress, Senate. All these seats that are out there and what they actually do, right? Because a lot of times we only look at the presidential election, right? We look at the president because the president is the highest office, right? So we look at that president, but a lot of us don't realize that how important the local people are, like the councilman, the Congress, and the Senate, the judicial system. We don't look at that because I don't know if it's because that's all you kind of really see a lot is president, because I think the presidents, they campaign like 2 years prior, about 18 months prior to election. So they out here about 18 months. A lot of times with our local politicians, you really don't kind of see them out here until it's election season, or like maybe about 3 to 6 months before election time. So it's hard for us to really probably grasp that how important they are because they're not out here like that. And also, in order to be out here like that, advertisement costs a lot of money. So whereas the presidential candidates, they get a lot of money, they have a lot of donations, but these local candidates don't have the finances to back them to do several commercials or billboards and things like that. You may have one here or there sporadically, but they're really the get in people face type people, jump in the mess and do the work out there. So they're so important. So what about parenting and what about voting? Like, how do they intertwine, right? I said, as one of the things I wrote here is, as parents, we're always thinking about our children's future, right? The education they'll receive, the environment they grow up, and the values we pass down. Voting is one of the simplest but most impactful ways to shape their future. Why do I say that? Because I just talked about education, I just talked about environment, and we talked about values, rules, and morals and ethics and stuff that plays a part in the judicial system, right? So why should we care deeply about voting? Why should we as parents care about voting? Because voting shapes our children's world. Like everything that we do in this world is based on a vote, right? People have to agree. We don't live in a dictatorship. This is a democracy here in America. So we don't live by what one person have to say and dictate our life. We literally have a whole system. Matter of fact, we have systems of things that help us and shape our world. So in order for that to happen, there has to be votes, and the majority wins, right? The majority gets to make the decision. So how is that important in us? Because we need to know, based on our morals, ethics, and values, of who to vote for, so that they can make the right decision, so that they can shape our world, right? So when we think about that, why is it important? Because education is always a hot ticket. It's always on a ticket, because education is so important. There are so many topics right now that we're talking about regarding education, about free education, about, for example, one of the things that has been near and dear to my heart, and we had it on the show before, I had a lot of teachers, right? I had a lot of educators, and more are coming on in the month of November, but the educators was expressing their concerns with the educational system and why teachers are actually leaving. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's a lot of times our students aren't even being able to be taught in class. Like, they may go virtual. I just seen recently a whole school district had to go virtual because there were over like 400 teachers in the district that called out. Now that sounds like a strike to me, right? But why are they striking, and what's going on? A lot of it is lack of funding. Teachers don't get the respect that they deserve, because they really do have a great, amazing job in help shaping our children's future. Our kids are at school 7.5, 8 hours a day. And I don't know about you, but 7.5, 8 hours a day is a long time to be in somebody's face and not know nothing and not learn anything, right? That's like literally you could be sitting your kid in front of a TV for 8 hours a day and they don't get anything. So sometimes, not being resourced in school or not having the proper tools to be able to educate our children properly, a lot of teachers are leaving because of the demand that's on them. And teachers want to be able to teach. They want to be able to teach. But it's just very difficult in this climate where there's a lot of disrespectful students. Like, they're dealing with so many behavior issues, right? And they're dealing with so many, even fear with all this school shootings and things like that. So there's so much involved in education, right? So we need laws that's going to, one, pay our teachers better, and two, resource our schools. A lot of schools are struggling because they're not getting the funding, right? So, and then, the whole thing is some school districts get more funding than others. And then also with the funding, what are they doing with it? So when we talk about voting, and we talking about the importance of it, because even when we think about the school districts, right, they have to be voted in their seats, right? That it's not something that they just decide to say, hey, I'm going to apply for this job and have this job. Like, you have to be voted in some of these leadership positions. So are we voting for these people to be involved in a school district, or we just like whatever and letting things go? Because that does make a difference as well, because that's who you're going to know who's going to fight for the things that morally, ethically, educationally that our children need. So it's so important how voting affects policies. Like, there's so many different policies that's on the table, and so many of them get ignored or really we don't pay attention to, because it calls us to kind of do some work and some research regarding it. But when we think about voting, because even when we think about the rights, like women rights, health rights, remember a couple years ago when Obama was in office and everybody was upset because of Obamacare, but that president administration, the Obama administration, insured so many people. Like, people were taking a hold of their health. They were living longer for their being healthy and be able to live longer to take to themselves so they can take care of their kids. So when we even think about voting and policies, we're talking about even healthcare. Everybody says that America needs to be like other countries where there's free healthcare. Well, there's technically there's never going to be free healthcare anywhere, because when you think about in other countries, I think like Canada, the tax is like 28% or something. So you're thinking that you're getting something free in one area, but yeah, another area you're paying very high for, right? And then also there's waiting lists for certain procedures. There's, I think the healthcare freedom that we have here, although it's complicated, and it's not the best, but when you compare it to other places, I think we have pretty good healthcare here. And thanks to the Obama administration of really setting that up to be able for all of us to get healthcare. And then not only that, making jobs be held accountable for supplying healthcare, for giving us healthcare, even if we have to pay it, but not at such an alarming rate where we have to decide if we're going to pay for our healthcare or we're going to pay for our food. That was the Obama administration. They really did that, and it kind of went into the next president, and that president kind of fumbled the situation, and then now we had another president. So it's really about what are things that are important to you, and our job as parents is to teach our children that, so that they understand what voting is and why it's so important. Again, so we talked about voting is important because it shapes our children's future, right? We're talking about education, and we're talking about healthcare. So also, we as parents become the role models for civic engagement, right? We teach them systems. We know that everything is built on systems, and there's different levels to systems, right? So that's also teaching them how to respect systems and how to understand systems, and potentially how systems can work for them, right? So our job in teaching our children and being a role model to our children, like not saying, oh man, I'm not voting because our vote don't count, all this stuff that we say, instead of getting in the race, getting in the stuff and making sure that our vote count. So instead of using something that we know that is such a negative thing as, oh, our vote don't count, and particularly in the African American community, we say our vote don't count, our vote don't count, but then we don't vote, and then we expect change. So really getting involved in voting and why it's so important, and our responsibility as citizens, like we have rights. So teaching our children that they have rights, because even think about this, right? We're not even talking about politics, right? The political system, but even in school, matter of fact, it's still talking about politics because they have student government, right? They have different levels in government and in school, so that children know what each role is and how it affects the student body. So as we're out here voting for, our political candidates, it's teaching that we're being a role model for our children to learn how to have civic engagement. Also, how it affects the future, because there's some laws that are laws have been laws since the creation of time, and that we might need to be shaped a little differently now, right? And there's some laws that they're only good for 5 years or only good for 10 years, and then we have to come back to the table and go over. So understanding what it is with this voting and how the laws actually work and how it's going to affect our future generation. Most of the policies that we have that we put into law don't just affect us now. Think about this. Do y'all hear, and I'm not here to persuade anybody of who to vote for. I know who I'm voting for, but I'm not here to persuade you to vote for a particular person. But what I will say is that when you think about when they talked about Project 2025 and all the language in there talks about the future. We're not even in 2025 yet, right? So when I say policies affect the future, that is a prime example of we're not even in 2025 yet, but they have this Project 2025, and a lot of that stuff in there is about permanency. It's not even about a 5-year plan, even just a 2025 plan. It is literally about eradicating some services to never bring back again. And that affects the future, right? So it's so important that we know and we teach our children how voting is important. Again, because we're talking about Social Security, we're talking about education, we're talking about just even when we talk about climate change, like all of that is in these policies, like how clean energy, like having clean energy, what we allow and not allow, because how it affects the people's health, right? When we even think about some of the things, like years ago, there was an issue in Michigan regarding lead, right? How much lead is allowed in our water because we know lead, how it affects the brain, right? How it messes up your cells and affects the brain, and you get lack of oxygen to the brain. So how much lead is dangerous? And is there a policy on how much lead we're going to allow to be in our water? Or, you know, there was a whole thing where there was a policy where there was no more allowed lead paint. Why? Because it was affecting our children, not just our children present, but it was the future of our children as well. So when we're talking about, it's not just about now, it's about now and later. Oh, remember that candy, y'all? Now and later. I didn't even really understand what now and later meant, but now, how things affect you now. Oh, I think the candy now and later was like, it's giving you a savory moment now, and then later on you're still going to get that feeling because there's some now and later that I eat, and then a couple hours later like that was good, you know. So it kind of like this is, anyway, that's now and later. But how things affect us now and later. Also, family issues are always on the ballot, right? It's always the electoral candidates are always talking about family-centered policies, like, you know, family engagement, how we're building communities. It takes family to build communities. So what support programs they're going to put in place, what child care subsidies. We know child care is expensive, right? So a lot of the people have to either work an extra job just to pay for child care, or some of them keep them home with their families. But a lot of kids really need early childhood education and can't afford it. So what policies would you put in place for that? Also, not I think one of the biggest things when we talk about education really is about early childhood education, because the foundation is so important. What else is on the ballot? There's just a lot of things. And I think also, as we are voting or we're teaching our children to vote, we are empowering them to build communities, right? So who we put on that ticket, who we check off on that ticket really helps us navigate things in our community so that we can build stronger communities. So again, I'm not just talking about the presidential election. That is an important election, right? However, I'm talking about the local politicians, those who actually write up the bills, right, and present them, and then those who actually make the law of them. So we're talking about the Congress, the representative, the council people, the Senate, the judges. Like, a lot of times we ignore about judges, but we got to be on point about who is going to be in charge of our judicial system, because we already know that there's such thing as the prison pipeline, right? So we already know that they're saying that kids who are not reading by fourth grade, they're more than likely going to end up in prison. Now, first of all, who made that up? I just want to know that. And secondly, so if you know that, how are we resourcing our families? What policies can we put in place so that our children don't go to jail because they can't read? See, this is the stuff that we need to be talking about, and how we need to be looking at these candidates. How are we going to prevent our children from going to jail? How are we going to prevent school shootings? How are we going to prevent our children not being fully educated? Like, what tools, what resources do we have in place, or what policies can we put in place so that our children can get these tools that they need? Now, here's the thing. It's not like when we're asking candidates to do certain things, it's not like there's money for it. The government has money to do all these other things, and there's money in the educational system. It's not enough, but there is money there, and there's money that can be allocated if we strip out some other non-necessities, right? So is the candidate pro-education? How do they feel about education? Do they think education is important? Do they think families are important? Because again, we're talking about parenting, right? Do they think investing in families, support groups, social groups for families to build a stronger community? We cannot just expect our communities to be flipped over overnight because one person says one thing. No, are they involved in the community? How do we have community-based programs that will build each other up? And are the candidates aware of those things, or are they willing to resource those things? So when we teaching our children about systems and how to vote correctly. These are things that we're talking about when we're teaching our children, right? What is and I think right now it's so important to talk about it because, again, we have an election coming up, and we know that there's a lot of controversy regarding this election on either side. If either candidate win, there is a lot of things potentially that can happen that has already been vocalized, right? So teaching our children why these things are probably happening is so important, and really just empowering them to be able to kind of take control of your life by making the right decision and putting the right person in place. So that's what I think about, and why voting is so important, how parents really need to be aware of what's going on and how to educate their children. So I think as the election day approaches, it is so vital for us to make a plan to vote. Take your kids to vote with you. They can't vote, but at least show them, so when there is time for them to vote, that they know how to do it. They can be like, oh, my parents took me, I went to go vote, and they even have a conversation about who we're voting, the candidates, even have a discussion about the candidates. I remember years ago when my kids, this was, I think, when Trump and Obama, I think it was one of those, I think this was Trump and Obama, and my kids was having a heavy debate in the house regarding both candidates and the pros and cons of situations that the candidates were bringing. And I thought that was so amazing because nobody was beating anybody up about their opinion. They were just saying, according to my standards and what I think this, and this is what I think that. And it was so cool to have a debate, with my 4 children. So it was 5 of us in the house, and everybody had something to say based on what they felt and what they perceive how the world should be shaped, right? So I think it's so important that we have these discussions, to sit down and have these discussions with our children, involve our kids, bring them to vote, explain why certain things are important to you and why things matter. And it will make a big difference. I think it'll make a big difference because it provokes thoughts in our children's mind. And it also helps build them to be help them understand how we can build a better world through families, and again, that generational thing. So if we have a strong foundation, a political foundation, a lot of people want to get away from politics. But politics shape our world. Like, you can't keep running away from something that affects you. Like, that doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, I'm going to ignore the whole thing, but then I'm going to complain when things don't go a way that I think they should go. But understand that our vote is a right and our vote is a choice. We can choose. And even though the majority dictates who we will have in office, but if there's enough people thinking right, we'll have the best person in office. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about when we talked about parenting and voting, and how voting really does shape the life of our children, the future, and how being a role model is so important when we talk about civic engagement. I think what we do will ultimately pass down to our children. So what are we passing down? Listen, there's so many things that we can pass down to our kids, right? There's so many negative things that won't do them no good, right? Passing down, things that does not build them up or have a positive community impact. So we want our kids to, and I think our kids, this generation right now, is really ready to have these conversations about civic engagement and how do we build our community better, because they see it and they're so witty. They have so many witty ideas that a lot of us old people can't even get with, because it's like, well, my brain don't even think like that. But the way that our children brain are these days, and they see things different than we do, which they should, because I think every generation should see things different and want to create something better for the next generation. So I think right now is the time really, because I think voting in these last couple of years has been the highest ever, by having conversations with our children, even our young adults, getting out there. Because there was a time, I think, where anybody under the age 30 really wasn't voting. Like, we didn't see the importance of it. I remember in my younger years, yeah, I'm gonna say my younger years because I'm getting up there, but in my younger years, I really didn't see the importance in voting. I didn't understand the levels and the systems that were put in place and why they were put in place until I started researching myself and realized that, oh, I do have something to say, or my vote does count, and that I'm allowed to have some type of input. Like, I don't have to walk around in like this autopilot living and then just doing what people say because that's what they feel like. No, I can actually get involved. I can help make some changes, help write some policies and do different things so that our children, and not just our children, so we can have the best world possible, right? So voting is so important. And again, like, I just want you guys to go out there, teach your children. Like, we still got a couple days before we actually go out there and for the presidential election. But teaching, and even on that ticket, right, it's not just the president on that ticket. On that ballot, there's several other political candidates. And really, I encourage you to research each one. Whether you're a Republican, Independent, or Democrat, it doesn't matter. Research each one so that you know that you're voting for the person who ethically, morally, spiritually, like, is in alignment with your beliefs, right? So I think it's just so important for us in teaching our children that, like, they matter. One of the other ways, I was thinking about this, y'all, one of the other ways to help our children understand politics or the voting system is have a vote system in your house. Because in my house, it's not a dictatorship. Although I'm the parent, I'm the head, they know I'm the leader. At the same time, I allow my children to have a voice and opinions, and we vote for certain things that happen in our house, like who wants spaghetti tonight? You know, who don't want this or who wants that, to really allow them to understand, to be able to exercise their voice. Because again, I don't know if a lot of people understand this or not, but in our household as parents, everything is done in the household, right? The first teachers, parents are the first educators, our cheerleaders, everything, our nurse, our doctor, our lawyer, parents are everything, right? So even teaching them how to vote within the household is important, because then they will learn how to do it out in the public sector. So really teaching them how to do it. So even if it's like voting who's doing dishes tonight, or who wants to sweep the floor tonight, or who wants to cook dinner tonight. I love that one. Who wants to cook dinner tonight, or who's taking the trash out tonight? Whatever it is, like, have a vote so that everybody's on the same page and they know that voting is important. So again, thank you guys for joining Parenting with a Purpose. I am your host, Donna Janelle. I look forward to really continuing the conversation about voting, even after this political election, right? Even after Tuesday, because it's just so important, again, in our household and just for our community, because even after this season, there's still other voting, there's other times to vote. When we talk about the school district and we talk about our local, the mayor, the council, men, women, and things like that. So I think this is a start of understanding why, as parents, our role is to make sure that our kids understand how to vote, the reason to vote, and what matters or important to us, right? So I encourage you all to do that. Make sure that you have these conversations. These are those conversations, like when you're at dinner or just hanging around with each other, like, just having these type of conversations is very important. So I hope, my prayer is that we begin to get engaged in every area of living for our children, not just what goes on in our household, but what goes on in our community, so that we can build a better world. Remember, parents are the bows and children are arrows, and they will land wherever we aim them, as long as we supply them with the tools that are necessary for them to grow and develop. So whatever you put in your child is what you're going to get out of your child. Whatever you put inside yourself is what you're going to get. So I encourage all parents to invest in themselves. Remember, I am the priority. I know I'm gonna get a lot of slack about this, but I don't care. I am the priority, because if I'm right, I then can parent my children effectively and efficiently, right? So just make sure that you're tapping in to yourself, constantly doing evaluation, self-evaluation to see what areas that you can improve in as a parent, and also having that conversation with your kids. Again, we talk about having our kids having opinions. I ask my kids, am I parenting you right? Do you feel that A, B, and C, or what do you think that I can do better to help you grow? Sometimes these kids don't know, but sometimes they do. They'll say, I need more time, or can you invest in this for me? Like, they really are able to have a conversation, age appropriate, but I think that's so important because that kind of helps understand how the world works too and how opinions do matter. So again, my name is Donna Janelle. I am your host of Parenting with a Purpose. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and understanding that voting is important and how we as parents really kind of set the foundation of voting and understanding that our children will essentially become who we are or better than we are. My goal is always to make sure that my children become better than me. So I'm going to put everything in them to make sure that we locked in, y'all. So again, thank you guys for joining Parenting with a Purpose. I am your host, Donna Janelle. I look forward to seeing you every Thursday night at 7 p.m. live, or you can follow us on Facebook at Parenting with a Purpose. You also can find us on Instagram under Donna Janelle. And you can also listen to the audio anytime you want, wherever you hear, wherever you view your podcast. Apple, Spotify, Amazon. We have just been featured on Amazon for the 4th time for one of our episodes in 3 years. So follow us on all of these podcast platforms so that you can hear us any day or time. Thank you guys again for joining Parenting with a Purpose. Y'all have a